welcome to this Moneycontrol special interview. We're in conversation with Bob Moritz, the Global Chairperson of PwC, and Sanjeev Krishan, the India Chairperson of PwC. They've just released their Global CEO Survey, which is a ritual here at the World Economic Forum. And Bob, I'm going to get right to it. There's a certain dichotomy, when I see the headline, right? Economic optimism has doubled among CEOs. But at the same time, almost half of CEOs don't believe their businesses will be viable in a decade because of tech and climate pressures. So take us through that. On the one hand, they're optimistic, but on the other hand, they're not sure they will survive.
Yeah, so let's get factual for a moment, if I can. They're more optimistic than they were last year. So let's remember that last year you had rising interest rates globally that no one knew how high they go, how long it lasts, and how steep the curve would be. You had inflationary pressures, not only with talent through the Great Resignation, but also through commodities and other goods and services. That was inflationary beyond expectations. Today, it's a little bit more controlled. You also had the issues of geopolitical risk that was very uncertain at that point in time, and how wide scale it potentially could be relevant to supply chain because of food and energy. So those factors are a little more certain today that give people confidence on the macroeconomic environment. Hence the reason they're confident on the global economy being better than what it was last year. Now, having said that, they're actually less confident in their ability to grow revenues in the next 12 months. And that's an important factor because they see this slowing economy for the factors I raised, and they see a pressure on them to identify, how can I raise my revenues? Can I change prices? Do I need new products and services? Am I going to compete? And I compete usually on price and quality. If I don't have that right, I'm going to lose. So you do have this concern that is very much associated with the longer term agenda that we talk about. In the longer term agenda, they see some really big challenges. They see implications relevant to generative AI, not today and tomorrow, but in a big way over the next 10 years. They see climate in a big way over the next 10 years. You see regulation continue to be a requirement. So all of those things are building up faster, bigger, and when combined together, cause a significant amount of external concern. And unless organizations are fast and changing radically, they won't be viable as a result of that changing environment.
Right. Sanjeev, Bob gave us the global perspective. Give us the India CEO survey perspective. I mean, does it mirror what the global counterparts are saying, or are Indian CEOs slightly more bullish? Because that's the sense I get when I speak to CEOs from India.
Well, certainly more bullish.
Give us the statistics.
So if you look at the next 12 months, 86% believe that they will do better. And if you look at over a 3-year period, 94% of them believe that they will continue to grow revenues. So in a way, a bit paradoxical, because globally, across the 4,500 respondents, they possibly believe that their own businesses will grow slower, but Indian respondents believe that their businesses will grow faster. The good news also is that they will do it by generating more employment, because in India, the growth, whether it's inclusive or not, is a big question. The good news coming out of the survey is that employment generation will continue to go up. And this is in spite of potentially some job losses, which may happen. I mean, we don't know because of GenAI and other things. I mean, those are still being thought about at this point in time. But it is going to be inclusive growth. And that is something, we know that. I mean, for a country like India, we're still coming through the curve. Employment generation is very critical. And the other thing which is standing out is that it's not just services growth. The whole focus on manufacturing is playing out. So I think the growth that we are seeing across sectors is more equal than it has ever been before.
Right. Bob, what do you make of that? Indian CEOs are bullish. The rest of the world is a little pessimistic. What does that signal to you?
I think the depiction you get from the CEO survey is spot on. You see a tremendous rise in opportunity in China for the citizens, in India, for the citizens of India. There's going to be more consumption that's going to be needed as you look at the billion plus that are there and the rise of the lower middle class. You see India being an alternative from a supply chain perspective, bigger than it ever has before. And you see Indian organizations starting to play more globally as you look at Indian people being in other parts of the world that are going to demand Indian goods and services. So there's nothing but upside for India from my perspective as you look here today. And the world is recognizing that. That's the other thing that we see, where you see people saying, I'm not only going to hire in India, to Sanjeev's point, I'm going to invest in India. And some of that may be M&A activity. Some of that may be capital deployment. Some of that may be infrastructure that they'll put in themselves as they think about campuses and other aspects like that. So I think there's a lot of upside potential for India. And as many have said, now is the time for India. This is India's decade.
Right. How crucial a role are elections going to play? Because we're going to have important elections around the world. India itself is going to go to polls. Is that also weighing on CEOs' minds?
Elections around the world are definitely weighing on CEOs' minds. But I will say that people are looking at three factors now. They're looking at the ultimate outcome of those elections and what plays out as a result if one party or another ends up in place. Will that change radically the business environment? The reality is some of the momentum that's been building in India, that's going to be there no matter who wins. Second is you see a tremendous amount of activity at the state level, particularly in India right now, where they're trying to be much more competitive, much more open for business and take down the rules and the regulations so there's an ease of doing business in the states and the municipalities themselves. And last but not least, people are looking at the process from here to there to get to that election. And I'm going to say in India, there's probably less risk of disruption during that process than honestly there is in other parts of the world. So there's a relative risk assessment here in terms of the journey leading up to an election that I think is promising for India itself.
Right. Sanjeev, India?
I would completely concur with Bob. And we talk about four transitions. We talk about energy transition, supply chain transition, technology transition, and demographics. India is central to all of them. So whatever the polity, I don't think that India Inc. is turning back. I think we're only moving forward. I think there have been a lot of studies which have said that, irrespective of the polity, the momentum that we have already built is good enough for at least a decade. And that goes to Bob's point. And, the reason that I'm so sanguine about India at this point in time really is because, as I said, it's not just services-led growth. Yes, there are a lot of GCCs coming into India, cost top, etc. But it's not only the low-end work. Now we are getting into R&D, innovation, and so on and so forth. That's what global corporations are using India for. You've seen the success, I would say relative success at the moment, but we hope it will become very successful of the PLI scheme and what is the impact it is having on the manufacturing sector, for instance. And I think that's again a case in point. Look at what is the commitments which have been made in the Invest Tamil Nadu sessions and the Vibrant Gujarat sessions just last week. A huge amount of commitments that have been made, including on things like semiconductor and others, where India was import dependent. So these are significant commitments and actually shows that global investors are actually flocking India and looking at India as a potential alternative, whether to supply chain, whether to their energy needs and so on and so forth, etc. And that makes me very, 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 very confident about India's growth in the very near future.
How do you add to this point? There's one other factor which we haven't talked about yet, which is how is India prepared previously for the digital revolution that's going to take a next leap forward with AI? And the reality is the country actually has put in a tremendous amount of infrastructure. When you think about the changes you've made to the banking system, the financial services system, the healthcare system, and yes, even the education system that's starting to come through right now, that solidifies the foundation where other countries are not as fit for purpose as where India is right now. So for you to take advantage of the opportunity that we see relevant to AI is another one, because AI is really good in terms of speed and scale. And if you think about the scale issue you have in India, the AI will be very much added into that, which I think solidifies the confidence level that we have for India as a country.
Right. Final question, Bob. You will be, stepping down in June. So tell us about what next after PwC. What will you be doing next? Will you be going into politics? Will you be going into philanthropy? What are your plans?
I don't have any definitive plans right now. I still got another 5 months of work to actually get done before this transition is effective July 1st. If I had to guess today, it's probably not politics. You never know and you can never say never. But it's probably a combination of corporate responsibility, governance responsibilities, and some philanthropic opportunities that hopefully exist in order to give back. And that goes to small to medium-sized enterprises as much as it goes to large enterprises, and it goes to those that are disadvantaged as you think about the philanthropic needs that are out there today.
What would you describe, as your biggest challenge during your tenure as chairperson?
The biggest challenge I think I had to deal with over the last 8 years was probably the implications of COVID. It caused us radically to reassess how business gets done. You had catastrophic effects that potentially were huge in terms of the risks, where people were worried about, are we going to have a society left after all of this, as you look at the health implications to it, and how to run a business in that new world order was probably one of the biggest challenges that I had to deal with.
On that note, thank you both very much for talking to us. Thank you. Thank you.